For decades, the skies have whispered secrets humanity was never meant to hear. This isn't fiction. These are some of the most documented, unsettling, and still unresolved alien and UFO encounters from around the world. From military airspace intrusions to physical trace landings, each case challenges what we think we know. Welcome to a new series where we step beyond speculation and into the evidence. This is 30 real UFO encounters that still defy explanation. Subscribe now if you're ready to explore the cases the government would rather you forget. Number 1. Roswell's incident. In the summer of 1947, something fell from the skies above Roswell, New Mexico, and what landed would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. On July 8th, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release. They had recovered a flying disc from a ranch outside the town. Newspapers ran the story nationwide, but within 24 hours, the military backtracked. It wasn't a flying saucer, they now claimed, but a weather balloon. The debris, aluminum, rubber, and sticks, was photographed and displayed. The matter, officials insisted, was closed. Yet, whispers continued. Witnesses described strange wreckage metal that returned to shape when crumpled, symbols etched in beams. Some claimed to have seen small humanoid bodies recovered and whisked away. Over the years, accounts grew in detail and volume, while government explanations shifted from weather balloons to Project Mogul, classified high-altitude surveillance program. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a report acknowledging that the debris was indeed from a secret balloon experiment. They offered plausible explanations for the rumors of alien bodies, mannequins used in high-altitude drop tests. Still, for many, the contradictions and cover stories only deepened the intrigue. Decades later, the winds of Roswell still carry more questions than answers, and in that silence, the mystery endures. Number 2. Rendlesham Forest Incident. In the quiet days after Christmas, 1980, something strange descended into the woods outside a U.S. air base in Suffolk, England, sparking what many have called Britain's Roswell. In the early hours of December 26, military personnel from RAF Woodbridge, leased at the time to the U.S. Air Force, reported unusual lights in the Rendlesham forest. Thinking it might be a downed aircraft, they ventured into the trees. What they found, they claimed, was not a crash but a craft. Descriptions varied: a metallic, triangular object with a glowing surface, hovering silently just above the forest floor. Over the next 2 nights, activity continued. On December 28th, Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt led a team into the woods. His audio recording from that night, still available today, captures rising tension as his team reports lights in the sky, strange movements, and readings of elevated radiation. Trees near the site appeared scorched, and indentations in the soil suggested something heavy had rested there. The British Ministry of Defense quickly dismissed the reports, attributing the sightings to misidentified lights from a nearby lighthouse and natural phenomena. Yet, witnesses have held to their accounts for over 4 decades, some maintaining that what they encountered was not of this world. There was no radar confirmation, no photographic evidence, and yet, no clear answers. Something lit up the forest that night. What it was remains lost in the tangle of testimony, trees, and time. Number 3. Phoenix Lights. On the night of March 13th, 1997, the skies over Arizona lit up with a spectacle witnessed by thousands, an event now etched into modern UFO lore as the Phoenix Lights. It began just after 7:30 p.m. A V-shaped formation of lights, eerily silent and massive in scale, was first reported near Henderson, Nevada. Over the next several hours, similar sightings moved southeast across Arizona, culminating in a dramatic display over the city of Phoenix. Witnesses from all walks of life, pilots, police officers, and families, described a low-flying object, seemingly one single craft, stretching across the night sky. Some said it blocked out stars as it passed overhead. Later that evening, a second set of lights appeared, stationary over the Sierra Estrella mountain range. These bright orbs hovered in formation before vanishing one by one. The military later claimed the lights were flares dropped during a training exercise at the Barry M. Goldwater Range, but the earlier, massive V-shaped craft seen across the state remained unexplained. Arizona's governor at the time, Fife Symington, initially dismissed the event, but years later he admitted he had seen it too, describing it as otherworldly. No radar returns. No military admission. It's the lingering testimony of thousands who watched something move across their sky, something vast, silent, and unexplained. To this day, no official report has fully accounted for the scale or silence of that phenomenon, and the question still drifts in the desert air. What exactly passed over Phoenix that night? Number 4. Belgian UFO wave between late 1989 and the spring of 1990. The skies over Belgium became the stage for one of the most well-documented UFO flaps in European history, an event now known as the Belgian UFO wave. It began in November 1989 when multiple witnesses reported a large, silent, triangular object hovering low over the town of Yupan. The craft was said to have bright lights at each corner and moved slowly, defying known aeronautical behavior. As the months progressed, the sightings increased. Over 13,000 people would eventually report encounters. Many described the same triangular shape, moving soundlessly or accelerating at impossible speeds. The Belgian Air Force took notice. On March 30th, 1990, 2 F-16 fighter jets were scrambled to intercept an object tracked simultaneously by ground-based radar and visual observers. Although the pilots locked on with radar, the object performed evasive maneuvers that exceeded the aircraft's capabilities, sudden accelerations, drops in altitude, and sharp turns without sonic booms. Official investigations followed, with the Belgian military collaborating with civilian UFO research group SOBEPS. Yet, despite radar data, witness testimonies, and even a widely circulated photograph, no conclusive explanation was offered. No foreign aircraft were identified, and no secret tests were acknowledged. To this day, the Belgian government maintains that something was indeed in the skies, something unknown. And while skeptics have proposed everything from stealth aircraft to misidentified stars, the true nature of the triangular objects remains elusive, suspended somewhere between documented reality and enduring mystery. Number 5. The Tic Tac UFO. In November 2004, off the coast of Southern California, a routine Navy training mission took a strange and unexpected turn in one of the most perplexing encounters in modern military aviation: the Tic Tac UFO incident. Pilots from the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group were redirected to investigate radar anomalies tracked by the USS Princeton over several days. What they encountered defied conventional logic. At an altitude of 20,000 feet, Commander David Fravor spotted a white, oblong object, roughly the size of a commercial jet, but with no wings, no exhaust, and no visible means of propulsion. It hovered erratically above the ocean, then abruptly darted from view, accelerating beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft. Multiple systems corroborated the sighting: radar operators, fighter jet infrared sensors, and the pilot's own visual contact. The object's movements, dropping from high altitude to sea level in seconds, stopping mid-air, then shooting off without a sonic boom, challenged fundamental principles of aerodynamics. The incident was classified for years, but in 2017, footage from the encounter was officially released by the U.S. Department of Defense. Since then, it has been the subject of congressional hearings, intelligence briefings, and high-level investigation. Yet, despite advanced sensor data and pilot testimony, the origin and nature of the Tic Tac object remain unexplained. Whether experimental technology, a natural phenomenon, or something altogether foreign, the Tic Tac UFO has left a trail of evidence, but no answers. And somewhere over the open ocean, that silent, featureless shape lingers in our collective imagination, an enigma gliding just beyond reach. Number 6. USS Princeton Encounter. On a calm November morning in 2004, the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton began tracking something unusual, a series of radar contacts darting across the sky at impossible speeds. What followed would become one of the most thoroughly documented UFO encounters in naval history. For nearly 2 weeks, Princeton's advanced Aegis radar system detected unidentified aerial objects descending from altitudes above 80,000 feet to near sea level in mere seconds. These tracks, as operators called them, repeatedly appeared off the Southern California coast before vanishing without a trace. On November 14th, the situation escalated. Fighter jets from the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group were vectored to intercept one of the anomalies. What they encountered was an object unlike any known aircraft, a smooth, white, oblong craft, about 40 feet long, moving erratically above the ocean. When pilots attempted to close the distance, the object accelerated and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Back aboard the Princeton, radar operators confirmed the contact had reappeared nearly 60 miles away in less than a minute. Later, an infrared targeting pod aboard an FA-18 captured a brief video of the craft's unassuming shape without wings or exhaust, known now as the Tic Tac. Despite extensive sensor logs, pilot testimony, and multiple tracking systems recording the event, no conventional explanation has ever been confirmed. The USS Princeton encounter remains an unsettling chapter in the annals of military aviation. Reminder that even the most advanced technology can sometimes only bear witness to mysteries it cannot solve. Number 7. USS Nimitz Encounter. On November 14, 2004, 100 miles off the coast of Southern California, the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group found itself in the middle of a mystery that would ripple through the highest levels of the U.S. military. For days, the USS Princeton and escort cruiser in the group had been tracking unidentified objects on its radar. These anomalies descended from altitudes above 80,000 feet to just over the ocean surface in mere seconds, maneuvering in ways that defied physics as we understand them. Fighter jets were eventually scrambled. Among them was Commander David Fravor, a seasoned naval aviator, tasked with intercepting one of these unknowns. What Fravor saw was unlike anything in his decades of experience: smooth, white, oval-shaped craft with no visible wings, no exhaust, and no markings. It hovered erratically above the ocean, then darted off, accelerating at such velocity that it vanished from sight within seconds. Moments later, it reappeared 60 miles away, precisely at the pilot's designated rendezvous point, as if it had anticipated their destination. The encounter was recorded on infrared cameras from another jet footage that was later leaked to the public and confirmed as authentic by the Pentagon. Despite multiple eyewitnesses, radar data, and video evidence, no official explanation has been offered. To this day, the USS Nimitz encounter stands as one of the most credible and perplexing UFO cases in modern history, raising questions not only about what was seen, but about who or what was behind it. Number 8. Gimbal UFO. In January 2015, off the eastern coast of the United States, a U.S. Navy fighter jet captured an image that would soon become one of the most talked about pieces of military footage in modern history. A peculiar object in the sky, now known as the Gimbal UFO, recorded using an advanced infrared targeting pod from a Navy FA-18 Super Hornet. The footage shows a dark, oblong craft suspended midair, surrounded by an apparent aura of heat. At first glance, it resembles a conventional aircraft, but as the camera locks on, the object performs a maneuver that defies known aerodynamic principles. Without any visible wings, engines, or exhaust, the craft rotates against headwinds while maintaining a stable altitude, as if inertia plays no role in its motion. The voices of the Navy crew, recorded in real time, reflect a mixture of awe and confusion. "Look at that thing. It's rotating," one pilot exclaims, while another struggles to reconcile the movement with what their instruments are showing. Unlike conventional drones or aircraft, the gimbal object seems immune to turbulence, control surfaces, or gravitational influence. Released by the U.S. Department of Defense and confirmed as authentic, the gimbal video joins a small collection of unexplained aerial phenomena acknowledged by official sources, but never fully explained. What exactly was rotating above the Atlantic that day remains unknown. But in a world where military-grade sensors still can't identify what they see, the boundaries of the explainable continue to blur. Number 9. Aguadilla UFO Incident. On the evening of April 25, 2013, U.S. Customs and Border Protection aircraft departing Roswell Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico, recorded something unexpected, an object that defied classification and left behind a trail of unanswered questions. The crew's infrared camera locked onto a small, fast-moving object skimming just above the ocean's surface. It moved erratically, weaving through the air with no visible propulsion, wings, or exhaust. At times, it dipped into the water, only to emerge again unaffected, maintaining speed and trajectory. What makes the Aguadilla UFO incident so distinct is not only the quality of the video, but the chain of custody. The footage was reportedly analyzed by multiple agencies before being quietly passed on to researchers. According to those who reviewed the data, the object's behavior was inconsistent with known technology, military or commercial. It's most baffling. At one point, the object appears to split into two identical spheres before continuing its path. The weather conditions were calm, no transponder signals were detected, and there was no scheduled or unscheduled air traffic reported in the area. Unlike anecdotal sightings or distant lights in the sky, this event is tethered to hard data, thermal imaging, radar gaps, and flight logs, all pointing to something physically present, yet curiously elusive. To this day, no agency has formally identified the object. It remains, quite literally, an unknown in both name and origin, hovering silently over the waters of Puerto Rico, then disappearing as quickly as it came. Number 10. Malmstrom AFB UFO Shutdown. March 1967. Deep beneath the plains of Montana, a flight crew at Malmstrom Air Force Base monitored America's most secure nuclear arsenal Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles. Each warhead sat dormant, silently awaiting a command that would, hopefully, never come. But one morning, something extraordinary happened. The missiles shut down. One by one. 10 ICBMs, fully armed and independently controlled, suddenly dropped offline. The crew inside the Launch Control Center scrambled to troubleshoot, but diagnostics offered no clear cause. At the exact same time, security personnel reported a strange object hovering just outside the base perimeter, glowing red orb, silently observing. The incident wasn't isolated. Second flight of missiles experienced a similar system failure days later. Investigations ensued, but no definitive mechanical fault was found. The Air Force officially attributed the outages to coincidental malfunctions, yet those present remained unconvinced. Years later, former launch officer Robert Salaz came forward, stating under oath that unidentified aerial objects were seen during the shutdown. His testimony echoed others in the military who had witnessed similar incidents near nuclear facilities, suggesting a pattern that was both unsettling and largely ignored. No weapon systems were damaged. No harm was done, but the message, if there was one, remains unclear. Why would something or someone interfere so precisely with humanity's deadliest tools? Was it a warning, a test, or simply observation? To this day, the Malmstrom incident lingers in military archives, in memory a quiet reminder that even in our most secure installations, control may not be absolute. Number 11. Shag Harbor Incident. October 4th, 1967. A quiet fishing village on the southern coast of Nova Scotia became the stage for one of the most documented and perplexing UFO encounters in Canadian history. It began just after 11:20 p.m. when residents of Shag Harbor saw a glowing object streak across the sky before descending rapidly and crashing into the dark waters of the harbor. Witnesses described flashing lights, a loud whistling sound, and a dull boom, followed by the sight of something floating offshore, softly glowing in the waves. Believing it to be a downed aircraft, local authorities and Royal Canadian Mounted Police rushed to the scene, but no wreckage was found and no missing aircraft were reported. Divers from the Royal Canadian Navy were dispatched in the following days. Their mission: to recover what many believed to be a crashed plane. Instead, the divers reported nothing, no debris, no bodies, no trace of any object beneath the surface. The glowing lights had vanished without a trace. Later, unofficial accounts from naval personnel hinted at a more secretive operation, claimed that an unknown object was tracked moving underwater from Shag Harbor to a nearby military installation off the coast. But the official story remained unchanged. The case was unsolved. Was it a misidentified natural phenomenon, a secret military craft, or something else entirely? The waters of Shag Harbor remained silent. But beneath the waves, a question still stirs: what really fell from the sky that night? Number 12. Kecksburg UFO Crash. October 4th, 1967. A quiet fishing village on the southern coast of Nova Scotia became the stage for one of the most documented and perplexing UFO encounters in Canadian history. It began just after 11:20 p.m. when residents of Shag Harbor saw a glowing object streak across the sky before descending rapidly and crashing into the dark waters of the harbor. Witnesses described flashing lights, a loud whistling sound, and a dull boom, followed by the sight of something floating offshore, softly glowing in the waves. Believing it to be a downed aircraft, local authorities and Royal Canadian Mounted Police rushed to the scene, but no wreckage was found and no missing aircraft were reported. Divers from the Royal Canadian Navy were dispatched in the following days. Their mission: to recover what many believed to be a crashed plane. Instead, the divers reported nothing, no debris, no bodies, no trace of any object beneath the surface. The glowing lights had vanished without a trace. Later, unofficial accounts from naval personnel hinted at a more secretive operation, claimed that an unknown object was tracked moving underwater from Shag Harbor to a nearby military installation off the coast. But the official story remained unchanged. The case was unsolved. The waters of Shag Harbor remain silent. But beneath the waves, a question still stirs: what really fell from the sky that night? Number 13. West Isle UFO Encounter. April 6, 1966. A quiet school morning in the suburb of Clayton South, Melbourne, turned into something far more unusual. Around 11 a.m., students and teachers at West Hill High School looked skyward and saw an object, silver, disc-shaped, and moving silently across the clear Australian sky. Roughly 200 witnesses, mostly school children, reported the craft hovering, dipping low over the nearby Grange Reserve, and then rising sharply into the air before vanishing at extraordinary speed. Some said it was pursued by 5 aircraft, possibly military jets, which circled before disappearing as quickly as they had come. Within hours, the area was swarming with uniformed men. Students were pulled into separate rooms. Teachers were instructed not to speak to the media. Some children claimed they were threatened into silence. The school's science teacher, who had attempted to take photographs, later said the images were confiscated by officials. The media reported briefly on the event, but follow-up coverage was minimal. The Royal Australian Air Force denied any activity in the area. No radar logs were released. No official explanation was provided. Over half a century later, the West Isle incident remains one of the most well-documented mass sightings in Australia's history. And yet, despite the sheer number of witnesses, the truth has never been formally acknowledged. What flew over that schoolyard in 1966, and why has it never been explained? Sometimes, the most puzzling mysteries begin in the daylight, with hundreds of eyes watching. Number 14. Pascagoula Abduction. October 11, 1973. Along the quiet banks of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi, two men's lives were forever changed. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, co-workers at a local shipyard, had gone fishing after work, a routine evening, until a strange craft descended near them in complete silence. The object was described as oval-shaped, glowing, and hovering just above the ground. What followed was even more bizarre. Hickson and Parker claimed that three beings emerged, pale gray, with wrinkled skin, claw-like hands, and no discernible eyes, and levitated the men into the craft. Inside, both reported being subjected to a medical-like examination. Hickson said he was scanned by a floating, mechanical eye. Parker, who was only 19 at the time, described losing consciousness, waking to strange noises, and feelings of intense fear. Minutes later, both were released, confused, shaken, and terrified. They reported the incident to local authorities. During questioning, the police left them alone in a room with a hidden recorder, hoping to catch signs of deception. Instead, the tape captured genuine panic. Decades later, Parker would publish a book and reaffirm his account, remaining consistent even into his final years. No physical evidence was ever recovered. Skeptics pointed to stress, hallucination, or fabrication, but neither man profited from the tale, and both avoided publicity for much of their lives. What exactly happened that night by the river remains uncertain. But for those who heard the trembling voices on that original recording, fear sounded real, and something unknown may have visited the Mississippi shore. Number 15. Lonnie Zamora sighting. April 24, 1964. In the desert outskirts of Socorro, New Mexico, a local police officer encountered something that would confound investigators for decades. Just after 5:45 p.m., patrolman Lonnie Zamora was pursuing a speeding vehicle when a sudden roar and flash of light diverted his attention to the west. What he saw next would alter the course of his quiet patrol forever. Zamora described seeing a shiny, oval-shaped object, metallic, resting on what appeared to be for landing legs. Near it stood two humanoid figures dressed in white. As he approached, the figures vanished behind the craft, which then emitted a loud, flame-like blast from beneath and rose into the air without a sound. The encounter lasted only a few minutes, but it left behind more than testimony. Physical traces at the scene included scorched earth, fused sand, and symmetrical landing impressions, later analyzed by Air Force and FBI officials. Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official investigation into UFO phenomena, took the case seriously. Their final report listed it as unidentified. Zamora was a well-respected officer with no prior interest in flying saucers. His calm demeanor, consistent statements, and lack of motive for fabrication lent rare credibility, yet no other witnesses emerged, and no craft was ever found. Over half a century later, the Socorro sighting remains unsolved, a clean case file with no obvious answer. The desert winds have long since erased the marks in the sand, but the moment remains suspended in time, as if something came briefly into view, and then quietly disappeared, enjoying the mystery. Drop a comment below with the case that unsettled you the most, and don't forget to like and share if you want part 2 to drop sooner. Number 16. Betty and Barney Hill Abduction. September 19, 1961. A quiet stretch of highway in rural New Hampshire became the backdrop for one of the most influential and controversial abduction cases in modern history. Betty and Barney Hill, a middle-aged couple returning from a short vacation in Canada, noticed a strange light in the sky following their car. What began as curiosity soon turned into unease. They described the light as maneuvering with intelligent precisions, sagging, hovering, and eventually descending. Barney stopped the car, stepped out with binoculars, and saw what he believed were humanoid figures observing them from within a large, disc-shaped craft. Frightened, the couple sped off. But then, silence. A 2-hour gap in their memory. When they arrived home, both felt deeply disturbed. Their watches had stopped, and their clothes showed strange signs of damage. In the months that followed, Betty began experiencing vivid dreams filled with intricate imagery, metallic rooms, medical examinations, and beings with large eyes. Under hypnosis, both she and Barney recounted similar experiences, despite being interviewed separately. Their descriptions would come to define the archetype of alien abductees: missing time, bright lights, and cold procedures carried out in silence. Skeptics point to sleep paralysis, cultural suggestion, or the influence of Cold War science fiction. Supporters argue that the couple had nothing to gain and everything to lose by going public. The Hills case became the first widely publicized alien abduction story in the United States, meticulously documented, but never fully explained. Even today, the question lingers: were they simply dreaming, or did something far stranger occur beneath that dark New Hampshire sky? Number 17. Travis Walton Abduction. November 5th, 1975. In the dense woods outside Snowflake, Arizona, a group of loggers finished their shift and began the drive home. But what happened next would lead to one of the most debated abduction cases in history. As the crew's truck wound through the trees, they spotted a bright, hovering disc emitting a high-pitched hum. Travis Walton, 22, stepped out of the vehicle to get a closer look. Moments later, a bolt of blue light struck him, lifting his body into the air and throwing him backward. His co-workers, gripped by fear, sped off only to return minutes later to find Travis gone. What followed was a 5-day search that gripped the region. Law enforcement initially suspected foul play, even murder. But then, Walton reappeared, confused, dehydrated, and shaken. He claimed he had been taken aboard a craft where he encountered humanoid beings with oversized eyes and sterile metallic chambers. The scenes he described were surreal, otherworldly, yet detailed. All involved took polygraph tests, passed, though skeptics point out inconsistencies in the possibility of group fabrication. Still, the case has remained remarkably consistent over the decades, drawing both scrutiny and support. Was this an elaborate hoax, born of fear and confusion, or did Travis Walton really experience something beyond human comprehension? Kata, the forest remains quiet, but the questions echo louder than ever. Kata, Allagash, abductions. In the summer of 1976, 4 friends ventured deep into the Allagash wilderness of northern Maine for a week of fishing, canoeing, and solitude. What they returned with was not just stories of nature's silence, but a mystery that would haunt them for decades. On the second night, while night fishing under a clear sky, the group saw a strange, luminous object hovering silently above the tree line. Curious, they flashed a flashlight in its direction. The object responded, moving toward them with alarming speed. In a panic, the men paddled frantically to shore. That's the last moment any of them remembered, until years later. Plagued by nightmares and sleep disturbances, the men Jim and Jack Weiner, Chuck Rack, and Charlie Foltzots sought help. Under separate hypnosis sessions, each recounted a similar experience: being taken aboard a craft, examined by non-human entities with large heads and dark eyes, and subjected to medical-like procedures. The details matched, yet none had discussed the memories prior. Skeptics point to the power of suggestion, shared hallucination, or the unreliability of hypnosis, but no evidence of deceit has surfaced. And perhaps most chillingly, the group's initial sighting was also reported by other campers in the area in an external layer to the mystery. Decades later, the Allagash River flows on undisturbed. But in the minds of those 4 men, something else remains adrift in scene, unexplained and unforgettable. Number 19. Ariel School Encounter. In a quiet clearing just outside Roswell, Zimbabwe. The morning of September 16, 1994, began like any other at Ariel School. By midday recess, something had occurred that would ripple across continents and remain unexplained to this day. Over 60 school children, aged 6 to 12, were playing when they reported seeing a silver-scaped craft descend beyond the school's boundary. Moments later, they claimed, small beings emerged, figures with large black eyes, slender limbs, and movements that seemed unlike anything human. Some children said the entities communicated not through words, but directly into their minds. The message, a warning about the environment and humanity's future. When teachers returned, they found the children visibly distressed. Yet, despite their age and the chaos of the moment, their accounts were strikingly consistent. A local BBC correspondent interviewed many of them on camera. Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, who would later travel to Rua to conduct in-depth interviews, concluded the children were sincere and showed no signs of fabrication or hysteria. No physical evidence was recovered. The craft left no trace. No adult witnessed the event. Still, the testimonies persisted, and decades later, those children, now adults, continue to stand by what they saw. Was it mass imagination fueled by stories, or something far more complex? In the silence that followed that day in Rua, the world was left with one unsettling truth. Sometimes, the most credible witnesses are the ones least expected. Number 2, O'Hare Airport UFO sighting. On a gray November afternoon in 2006, one of America's busiest airports became the stage for an encounter that defied conventional explanation. At approximately 4:15 p.m. on November 7th, United Airlines employees at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport spotted something unusual hovering silently above gate C-17, a metallic, disc-shaped object, motionless in the overcast sky. Ground crew, pilots, and supervisors reported seeing the object for several minutes before it suddenly shot upward at tremendous speed, leaving behind a visible hole in the cloud layer. No radar captured the anomaly. The FAA initially denied the incident occurred, later attributing it to a weather phenomenon. But the witnesses, some with decades of aviation experience, remained adamant what they saw was not a conventional aircraft, nor a trick of light. Several filed official reports, prompting coverage from major outlets, including CNN and the Chicago Tribune. Unlike many sightings relegated to distant fields or remote regions, this one occurred in tightly controlled airspace. The implications disturbed those tasked with protecting national security. If it was nothing, why did it leave a physical trace in the sky? If it was something, why did no system detect it? To this day, the O'Hare incident remains unresolved, yet extensively documented. In the corridors of one of the world's most monitored airports, something came and went, and left behind a question no one has managed to ground. Number 21. Tehran UFO Incident. On the night of September 18, 1976, the skies over Tehran lit up with something that military radars couldn't ignore and fighter jets couldn't catch. Just after midnight, Iran's Imperial Air Force received multiple reports of a glowing object in the sky, described by civilians and ground controllers as intensely radiant and maneuvering with unnatural precision. The Iranian military scrambled to F-4 Phantom jets to intercept. As the first jet approached, it suddenly lost all instrumentation and communications. The pilot retreated and the systems returned. A second jet was sent. This one came closer, according to official pilot testimony. As he attempted to fire upon the object, his weapon systems inexplicably failed. What makes the Tehran incident particularly compelling is the convergence of radar data, pilot accounts, and civilian observations, pointing to a highly sophisticated aerial presence. The object was said to emit a blinding light, separate into smaller, glowing units, and accelerate instantaneously far beyond any known capabilities of the era. After the encounter, U.S. defense analysts took keen interest. Declassified DIA document described the event as an outstanding report, noting the high reliability of the witnesses and the radar confirmation. No conclusive explanation ever surfaced. The official files remain open-ended, a technical glitch, misidentification, or a rare encounter with something that operated beyond our understanding. Whatever moved over Tehran that night came, performed, and vanished without leaving a trace we could follow. Number 22 Val Johnson Incident. At 1:40 a.m. on August 27, 1979, in the quiet expanse of rural Minnesota, a deputy sheriff on routine patrol found himself face to face with something he couldn't explain and would never forget. Val Johnson was driving along a dark stretch of Highway 220 near Warren, Minnesota, when he saw a bright light hovering above the road ahead. Within seconds, the light rushed toward him at an impossible speed. His patrol car was engulfed. It lost consciousness for nearly 40 minutes. When Johnson awoke, the car had come to a stop in a ditch. The windshield was shattered, the antenna bent at a sharp angle, and both headlights damaged, but curiously, all the damage showed signs of force from above, not from a crash or collision. Even stranger, both of Johnson's wristwatch and the car's onboard clock had stopped for exactly 14 minutes before resuming as normal. Medical examinations confirmed minor eye burns consistent with exposure to intense light, yet no conventional source of such light could be identified. The incident was investigated by the Marshall County Sheriff's Office, the Minnesota State Patrol, and even the FBI. No drugs, alcohol, or known technology could account for what had happened. Johnson, a level-headed officer with a clean record, never changed his account. His story remains one of the most thoroughly documented and most perplexing close encounters on record. To this day, the patrol car sits in a local museum, preserved in the exact condition it was found. A silent artifact of a night where time paused, and the sky held something no one could quite name. Number 23 Cash Landrum Incident. On the night of December 29, 1980, a quiet drive through the pine forests of East Texas turned into an encounter that would alter the lives of 3 people forever. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Landrum's 70-year-old grandson were traveling near Huffman, Texas, when they noticed a bright, diamond-shaped object hovering above the road ahead. It emitted intense heat and a blinding light. As they approached, the object appeared to be engulfed in flames and was accompanied by a fleet of unmarked, military-style helicopters circling above. The heat was unbearable. Betty stepped out of the car and was instantly hit with a searing wave of radiation-like energy. The witnesses later reported nausea, vomiting, skin blisters, and hair loss symptoms consistent with radiation exposure. Betty was hospitalized for weeks. Her health would never fully recover. Despite multiple inquiries, no government agency acknowledged involvement. The U.S. military denied any exercises in the area, and no official explanation was offered for the helicopters or the object. Lawsuits were filed against the U.S. government, but were dismissed due to lack of evidence. The Cash Landrum incident remains one of the few alleged UFO encounters with documented physical harm to the witnesses' harm that left permanent medical records and unanswered questions. Were they accidental bystanders to a classified military test, or witnesses to something beyond our understanding? More than 4 decades later, the road remains the same, but the silence around that night grows deeper with time. Number 24 Coin Helicopter Incident. On the night of October 18, 1973, over the quiet skies of Mansfield, Ohio, 4 Army Reserve crewmen flying a UH-1H helicopter encountered something that would defy logic and nearly cost them their lives. Captain Lawrence Coyne and his crew were returning to Cleveland after a routine training exercise when, at 11:10 p.m., a red light appeared in the sky, heading directly toward them. Within seconds, it closed the distance faster than any known aircraft. As the crew braced for impact, the object stopped abruptly, hovering just feet above their rotor blades. The cockpit was bathed and a green light. Instruments malfunctioned. The altimeter showed a rapid descent. Then, suddenly, without input from the crew, the helicopter began to rise. The object was described as metallic gray, cigar-shaped, with a dome and a distinct red light at its nose. The entire event lasted less than 5 minutes, but its implications have lingered for decades. After landing, the crew filed official reports. Investigators found no evidence of atmospheric conditions or equipment failure to explain the encounter. Even skeptics within the military conceded the crew was highly credible and experienced. The Federal Aviation Administration and U.S. Army investigated, but no official explanation was ever issued. Was it an experimental aircraft, a misidentified celestial body, or something entirely unknown? The coin incident remains one of the most thoroughly documented close encounters in military aviation history, a case where silence, not answers, continues to fill the sky. Number 25. The Chicago Mothman sightings. In the shadows of America's third largest city, a strange winged figure began appearing, silent, swift, and unsettling. It was 2011 when Chicago first reported sightings of what some began calling the Mothman. The earliest modern accounts described a humanoid creature with glowing red eyes and a wingspan over 10 feet. Sightings spanned neighborhoods from Little Village to O'Hare, and reports surged between 2017 and 2018. Witnesses included delivery drivers, airline employees, and ordinary residents, many unrelated and unfamiliar with Mothman folklore. Most claimed the entity glided noiselessly, often vanishing into the night sky or over bodies of water. Unlike the famous 1966 Point Pleasant Mothman sightings, which preceded the Silver Bridge collapse in West Virginia, Chicago's version lacked a singular, tragic climax. Instead, it unfolded as a long string of eerily consistent encounters, each one adding another layer to a growing urban mystery. A team known as the Phantoms and Monsters 40 Research Group began documenting these reports, treating them as more than mere urban legend. Skeptics point to cranes, owls, or misidentified drones. Yet aviation experts say the described flight patterns and physiology don't match known wildlife. So psychological explanations like mass hysteria have also been considered, though they fail to account for the wide geographic and demographic spread. So what, then, was seen swooping through Chicago's skies? No conclusive photographs, no definitive evidence, dozens of independent testimonies casting a long shadow across the city skyline. Somewhere above, perhaps, those wings still beat quietly in the dark. Number 26. The Levelland UFO case. On a cold night in November 1957, the flat plains of West Texas were interrupted by something that would leave even hardened lawmen perplexed. Outside the small town of Levelland, multiple motorists reported encounters with a glowing, egg-shaped object hovering above the road. As it approached, car engines died, headlights dimmed, and radios fell silent only to return to normal once the object vanished into the sky. Over a dozen similar reports came in within a matter of hours, all describing nearly identical phenomena. Among the witnesses were truck drivers, college students, and a local sheriff's deputy. None of them knew each other. All of them described the same sequence of events. The Air Force responded quickly, dispatching investigators under Project Blue Book. Their official conclusion: ball lightning, or perhaps a severe electrical storm. But weather reports for the night indicated clear skies and ball lightning, while a real but poorly understood phenomenon has never been reliably linked to vehicle engine failure or repeated multi-location appearances. Unlike many UFO reports that rely on a single account or vague lights in the sky, the Levelland case stood out for its consistency, its number of witnesses, and physical interference with machinery, something not easily dismissed as illusion or hysteria. To this day, no conventional explanation has fully accounted for what happened along those dusty Texas roads. And, as the night air still settles over the flatlands of Levelland, the question remains: what silenced the machines, and who or what was watching? Number 27. The Exeter Incident. In the early hours of September 3, 1965, a quiet New England town became the unlikely stage for one of America's most meticulously documented UFO encounters. Just after 2 a.m. in Exeter, New Hampshire, a young man named Norman Muscarello was hitchhiking along Route 150 when he spotted something extraordinary, an enormous, silent object hovering low over a field, glowing with brilliant red lights. Terrified, he ran to a nearby house and called the police. Officer Eugene Bertrand responded, and later, joined by Officer David Hunt, he returned with Muscarello to the site. What happened next would be corroborated by all three men. As they stood near the trees, a massive object described as the size of a barn, with a row of bright, pulsating red lights, rose silently from the field and passed directly overhead. Animals in nearby barns reportedly stirred in distress. The object moved without sound, then accelerated rapidly out of sight. The U.S. Air Force investigated the event as part of Project Blue K and initially suggested it was a misidentified aircraft from nearby Pease Air Force Base, but base officials denied any flights in the area that night. Local radar showed nothing unusual. The credibility of the witnesses to trained police officers and a civilian with no prior UFO interest gave the Exeter case unusual weight. Their statements remained consistent under questioning. Despite multiple explanations offered over the years, the encounter has never been conclusively debunked, and the quiet town of Exeter remains, decades later, tied to a moment where the night sky briefly refused to explain itself. Number 28. Socorro UFO landing. On a quiet afternoon in April 1964, a police officer in the small town of Socorro, New Mexico, made a report that would ripple through the annals of American UFO history. Officer Lonnie Zamora was chasing a speeding car when he heard a loud roar and saw a flash in the sky. Diverting from the pursuit, he crested a hill and spotted a strange, egg-shaped object landed in a gully. Two figures in white coveralls appeared to be standing beside it. As he approached, the beings vanished, and the object lifted off the ground with a thunderous blast, flames erupting from beneath its base. A Keith rose silently into the air, then sped off over the desert horizon. Zamora immediately radioed for backup. When investigators arrived, they found burned brush, impressions in the soil, and physical traces that suggested a heavy object had rested there. Finney quickly drew the attention of Project Blue, hooked the U.S. Air Force's official investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. What set the Socorro case apart was Zamora himself, a respected, soft-spoken officer with no history of seeking attention. His sincerity left an impression on everyone who interviewed him. He stuck to his story with calm consistency. Over the decades, skeptics have proposed hoaxes, experimental aircraft, or misidentified natural phenomena. None of these explanations have ever fully accounted for the physical evidence left behind in the desert, in a region steeped in aerospace secrecy and vast, empty space. The Socorro landing endures an official record etched in the dust with no clear origin or conclusion. Number 29. Falcon Lake Incident. On May 20th, 1967, in the wilderness of southeastern Manitoba, Canada, a quiet prospector's search for precious metals turned into one of the most perplexing UFO cases in North American history. Stephen Michalak, an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist, had traveled to Falcon Lake in search of quartz veins. As he worked near a rock formation, he noticed two glowing cigar-shaped objects descending from the sky. One of them hovered briefly before landing on a flat outcropping just 150 feet away. Michalak approached, observing its metallic surface and hearing what he described as a whirry sound, like a running motor. Believing it to be a secret military aircraft, he stepped closer. The craft had no visible markings, but through an opening, he glimpsed light and heard muffled voices. When he called out, the figures inside fell silent. Moments later, the craft suddenly rotated in a grid-like exhaust vent expelled a blast of hot gas, striking Michalak in the chest and knocking him backward. His shirt was set ablaze, and his torso was scorched in a pattern that mirrored the vent's shape. He was treated at a hospital for burns and nausea, and later showed signs of radiation exposure. Investigations by Canadian and U.S. authorities yielded no official explanation. Samples from the site contained unusually high levels of radiation, and Michalak's story never changed. On one occasion, a student named Carl Hart Jr. managed to capture a series of photographs showing the glowing arcs in the sky. The Air Force took notice. Project Blue Book, the government's official investigation into aerial phenomena, launched a formal inquiry. Their conclusion: dites may have been birds reflecting the newly installed streetlights. But this explanation fell flat for many. Birds rarely fly in tight, symmetrical patterns at night, let alone at high altitudes and speeds. And no one could account for the apparent intelligence behind the movement or the sheer number of sightings by trained observers. Decades later, the images remain, the testimonies stand, but the lights themselves, where they came from, what guided them, and why they vanished remain unanswered, suspended somewhere between science and speculation. And yet, we've only just begun. This was part 1 of 30 real UFO cases that continue to puzzle experts, silence skeptics, and ignite global curiosity. The next chapter dives deeper into encounters governments try to erase and testimonies too consistent to ignore. Subscribe and stay tuned. Part 2 drops soon.